Hey, what's up, everybody? Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bike. Owen Cole in the building from UAE Devo, now coaching with EVOQ Bike. And we had set out to do a NICA-specific mountain bike video for everyone and talk about different aspects of being a teenage athlete and some collegiate stuff as well, as Owen raced at North Carolina. But there's a lot of good mountain bike tips in here and things that float over to even forcing me to think about my own training as a roadie. So I think there's a lot in here for everybody. Good luck with your training and racing. Check out the show notes if you need a NICA training plan. Hit up Owen with questions, owen@evoq.bike. Everybody, good luck with your training and racing. We'll talk to you soon. See ya. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. Special guest, Owen Cole. Super excited to chat with him. We're going to focus a lot on the NICA high school mountain bike coaching, training, how to succeed at this. And Owen has joined EVOQ as a coach specifically focused on this since he has a lot of experience with it. And I've always had questions of like the challenges of training younger athletes that are in school, that have team practice. There's just a lot of other dynamics than the normal 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old who's working and then training after or before work. So Owen, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to EVOQ. Why don't we kick it off with an intro? Who is Owen Cole?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Currently road racer and student at UNC Chapel Hill. Started out mountain biking, racing in middle school, and just gradually got kind of more serious and into it through middle school and high school. And then eventually when I started at UNC, started racing a lot more on the road. And that led to collegiate road and U23 road national championships last year in 2023. And then spent this year racing entirely on the road with the UAE development team over in Europe.
That's awesome. What's that first year been like over in Europe?
Eye-opening. It's pretty crazy how much of a different sport it is over there. I'd been over there a little bit. Last year I did the World Championships, and so I got to experience it a little bit, but it's a whole different world when you do it for a whole year.
That could be a podcast in itself, but I know some people are thinking, what is he
Easily.
talking about? What's so different?
Oh my gosh. It's like if you made cycling a sport, like we have baseball and football here. I mean, it's like every kid's doing it. And so it just makes the level that much higher and it makes it just that much more intense. It's a little bit like in the US, it's still a fun recreation sport in a lot of ways. And over there, it's a lot of people's lives. So it just makes it like a whole nother level.
I never forget, I checked into an Airbnb in Leuven in Belgium when I was over there, and the woman who was maybe in her mid 40s was like, "Oh, you a Gilbert fan?" I'm like, "Philippe Gilbert?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "How do you know about him?" She's like, "Welcome to Belgium. We all know him." And I was,
Yeah.
"Okay, yeah, different world. Here we go. This is their
Yeah,
baseball." Yeah,
exactly.
that's awesome. Yeah, that we'll have to do a podcast on all of that later. Maybe get another
Oh
season under
yeah.
your belt and then see. Yeah, let's
There's
jump into
so
NICA.
much great stuff there.
So much great stuff there, and so much stuff that most Americans will never get to see and experience. So it's awesome having people that have that to talk about. Let's we kind of talked about some different topics. I think one of the biggest ones, challenge of training while you're in school. It's so much more than a job, it's your
Mhm.
life. And then you have to, I think everyone who's been a student athlete knows a lot of those challenges, but I've never been involved in endurance sports at that age. So kind of what jumps out to you as the challenges for these athletes while they're dealing with school and going through high school?
Yeah, I mean, like on the surface, obviously there's a big time constraint, a little bit less so in college because you make your own schedule. But for a lot of these NICA racers in middle and high school, you obviously just have a pretty big time constraint. But I think that's like the surface level challenge. But then if you try to use up all of that available time, you're just going to overwork yourself. You're going to like mentally and physically exhaust yourself. So you have to be really smart about how much you're training just because you have so much other load on your body outside of riding a bike.
Mm.
So you really have to make sure athletes are dialed in and like focused on their recovery. So they're not, getting over eager, pushing too hard, trying to use up all their free time training when there's a lot of other aspects to it that are really important to recovery, making sure you're eating enough, taking care of your body, not getting injured, sleeping enough. So yeah, there's a whole host of different things that get really important there aside from just the surface level limit of only having a couple hours a day to ride.
How do you stress that? And I'm trying to, think of maybe if I had been an endurance athlete in high school, I would better understand this. But to me, when there was no basketball practice, whatever we were doing, that's when you went out and like you hiked, you played another sport, you were riding
Yeah.
bikes, you were doing all these other, I was not recovering. That was never even talked about. Is this something that endurance athletes at this age are more just dialed into naturally because that's sort of in the lexicon of cycling? Or is it something that you really have to hammer home? Yo, rest day means go for a walk, like do something chill. Or how do these athletes respond to that? Because they're teenagers, or college kids, like they're hyper.
Yeah, it definitely kind of depends. There's definitely some athletes who are super eager and sometimes even over eager and just want to be on all the time. And then there's some who have a little bit easier time seeing in training peaks, oh, there's a rest day today. I'm just gonna go hang out with my friends. It's not a big deal for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think across the board, it just is really important. You can't, it's not something you can teach overnight, but just over the period of time that you're coaching them, always just talking about how rest days and rest weeks are when you actually make your gains and get faster, because you're allowing your body to rest and build. And so if you just over time keep hammering home that point, making it sound super important because it is, eventually they'll kind of pick up on it, and you just have to keep mentioning it to them because it really is like one of the pinnacles of training.
That's a really interesting point of like it's not an overnight change because I even have adult athletes that, oh, I feel good, so I rode harder. And while they can maybe get
Yeah.
away with that in 1 week, I try to tell them, hey, this might not be a problem today in the micro, but when you keep doing this over and over again, after 6 weeks, let's say, you're going to find yourself really exhausted. So I can see the converse being the same thing, like trying to change them into more rest over or the right amount of rest over a longer period of time as opposed to as a coach hoping they just change their habits in a week from one mention. That's a really good point. Um, any other challenges of training for athletes this age?
I mean, a lot of them also just in the beginning, it takes a long time to teach them just how to train. There's only so much you can write down for a workout. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them, are used to just going and riding. And some days they ride hard and some days they ride easy. And there's a lot more to training, than just going out and riding hard. There's different criteria you want to hit in a workout, different zones you're trying to hit, and really specific ways you've got to hit them. And some of that is a little bit easier for mountain biking because I think, like we talked about, we'll get into later, a lot of it is skills training as well. So it's not always, staring at your power meter or your heart rate monitor, um, because you're just pushing hard. But it is sometimes a challenge, and it definitely was when I started training for me to learn, how to actually follow these workouts and not just go and ride because that's what I'm used to doing.
Executing. Yeah, I love that. This might be a lead into the next question, or maybe slightly different. Like athletes are, they're getting more into intervals, they're getting more into structure, I think, earlier than um, maybe some might expect. How do you break down like when to start giving athletes intervals? How many per week? Maybe that this is a segue into differences between younger athletes and older athletes. Where how do you flush that out?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's not a single like NICA mountain bike racer that I wouldn't give some sort of intervals, but I think at the basic level, maybe some of them I'm not giving, some steady like winter sub threshold intervals or stuff like that, but they're almost all going to do some sort of trail intervals because that's what you've got to practice at the end of the day is going fast on trails.
Mhm.
So whether they're all out race pace or more of like a tempo style effort, it kind of depends on where you're at in your season. Um, but that's definitely workouts I'm giving all of them is some variation of going fast on trails for a certain amount of time and practicing doing the same loop a bunch of times and getting better at it because that's how you race as well. You've got to be able to show up to the venue the day before the race, practice the trail a couple times, and be really dialed on it. So
I love that. That's a great way to like give them a 5 by 5. Hey, go do this 5 minute loop full gas, then go really
yeah,
chill, then go full gas, then go chill. And then they start to see the differences in how they ride on the first lap and fifth lap, and connect different dots of, oh, this is how I might feel towards the end of the race or just the middle of the race. And it's really interesting to hear their dialogue walking through that. What do you see as most people training by? Just speed or heart rate, RPE, power? How does that all break down?
A lot of them at the beginning definitely just use RPE, and then they kind of realize, oh, I want a little bit more metric here, and the heart rate monitor is obviously the cheapest, easiest, best way to do that. So a lot of them go that route, and then the ones who get really into it will get a power meter. But I really stress that like that's a big investment, and it's for training for mountain bike, it's something we use in the winter base season just to keep you in check. But during the season, a lot of what we're doing is either all out or easy, so it's not the most important. And especially on trails where your power is just super spiky anyway, it's
Mhm.
maybe cool to look at day to day on the same loop, but aside from that, it doesn't really tell you too much.
Interesting. Any other differences in coaching that stand out from younger athletes versus adults?
I mean, I don't even know if it's a difference, but like we were saying earlier, it is just I find it really important to always be checking in with them, to make sure they're not doing too much. A lot of them aren't super eager to reach out and tell you how they feel because they don't want to feel like they're letting down their coach or anything. But
Mhm.
you just got to really stress that it's really important if you're feeling like this is a little too much for you, or you've got a lot of work in school right now. You just need to maybe take this week as a little bit more of a rest week. It's just really important to stay in constant communication so that we really don't want to overdo it, because at a young age when you're in school, if you go over that limit, it can be hard to come back, especially for these eager kids who really want to just be riding their bikes all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. This is so interesting to think back about. I wish I had experience in endurance sports of like what it felt like when I was tired at practice. There's just those days where I'm thinking of like, you go up to jump and get a rebound. It's like, oof, I just do not have it today. But you're with your team, your coach is there. He doesn't know what your day was
Yep.
like. For me at least, they were not checking in like I think an endurance coach does. So that's a really good point and really good reminder for adults. There's adult athletes that don't want to let their coach down, and we all have those days. It's really important to not let training peaks be the dictator to your training. You have to check in and be like, okay, where am I really at? Can I try this
Yeah.
workout and push through, or am I just exhausted? And I think that comes with experience too. Over time, you know when to go and when not to go.
Yeah.
Um,
Your training peaks is a great, like, it tells you what to do generally, but it doesn't know how you feel day to day. And I don't, when I make your plan, I know roughly how you feel, but
mhm.
I don't know exactly how you're going to feel. And if it's different from how you normally feel, like that needs for sure needs to be communicated.
That can be a whole other thread too that we were kind of talking about offline on our coaches call of testing, when to test, and the biggest
Yeah.
thing that I think a lot of us came to is it's impossible to schedule this magic day when you're going to put out the best 20-minute power to maybe make your zones or however a coach assigns that. And it really, I mean, yeah, that could be a whole other podcast in
I
itself.
mean,
So,
especially at that high school or middle school level where you've got school, you're getting different amount of sleep every night. You got a different amount of stress about classes. There's like the more variables you add into your life, the more factors there are that are going to determine how you're going to feel each day. So some days you are just going to be a little bit more tired, and that doesn't mean your whole body is fatigued and you need to take a rest week. But if it happens in 3 or 4 days in a row, that's your warning sign.
bringing up that concept of stress, I never even thought of, and no one was ever like, hey, try and reduce stress on this like big week of quarterfinals of the state championship. Whereas now, I mean, I've realized as an endurance athlete how much worse I am on the bike when I'm super stressed out, and just
Yeah.
trying to carp like leave things at work, and when I'm on the bike focus on the bike and life. And it's just you can't always let all these like this, if there's a stress in one thing, don't let it affect every other aspect of your life. But yeah, that's a really good point. You brought up team practices, and this is I'm very curious about how, not only how you work this with your athletes, but how did this feel when you were in these shoes, like trying to do your own training but do what the team has going? How does that break out?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. There's no hiding the fact that it is a challenge, but if you want to do all those NICA races with your team, you do have a commitment to go and practice with your team. So I really have always tried to stress that that's really important, and whatever we need to do to make it work in your training plan, we're going to do, even if it means, at once one practice per week every so often, you've got to miss it because it's close to the race and you really just need to hit this key workout and be done. Um, a lot of what I did when I was in high school, we had a really great team with a lot of riders who really always wanted to push. So a lot of what our practice structure would be like on a Tuesday, we would practice Tuesday and Thursday. Our Tuesday would be just we'd pick a trail loop and do laps for of it for practice, and you could do those at whatever pace you wanted. So trying to schedule trail workouts for those days where I go do 3 by 20 minute trail time trial efforts on that loop, and it was just super easy because that's what we were doing for practice that day. Um, or sometimes I'd have to try to get out a little bit before practice, knock out some intervals, and then go just ride with them at practice as more of an endurance trail ride. And that would generally be what our Thursday practice was. I think above all, though, just knowing what your practice is going to be like going into it is the biggest difference maker. Because if we can just schedule the rest of your week around two practices, it's not that hard to do. If we know this one's going to be easy and this one's going to be hard, well, I'll just put that in as a hard ride and an easy ride, and the rest of your week we can go look at after we know that.
Are coaches that have you gathered that are most coaches consistent with how they want the athletes to train on the team rides, or are they putting out like, hey, here's the schedule for the next 3 weeks, or how does the athlete actually know what to expect?
That can be the hard part, and usually in my experience, they just had to ask. And eventually, you kind of get used to it once you get a pattern going and get into race season. But yeah, it can be hard, to figure out what exactly you're doing before practice. And that's another place I think communication with an athlete becomes really important is, we had that ride scheduled in as a hard trail ride, and you went to practice and you guys just rode around easy and practice skills the whole time. So I need to know that because then we need to change your easy ride for tomorrow to go out and get some speed work in because you missed what we were hoping to have today. Um, so yeah, it can definitely be a challenge, and a lot of coaches can be really good about just making a consistent schedule. At the very least, maybe the first practice of the week is going to be hard, and the second one is going to be more moderate. And so that's at least a great starting point to work off of. But then I've worked with some athletes whose NICA coaches are like, nope, these days we're doing this workout. This day we're going to do this easy ride, and then this is close to the race, so we're going to go sprint up this hill for this practice. And it's super easy to work with because I can put an exact workout into Training Peaks and know exactly what you're doing that day. And that, I mean, the more you know, the better.
Hmm. It's an interesting point of when you had other athletes around you that wanted to push and were maybe at your level or similar level. What do you think about, what about the teenager who doesn't, maybe they're just that much better. They don't have people to help push with. And I know a lot of these athletes don't go out on the road. You kind of were talking to me about this, how their parents might not let them do group rides on the road. Or
Yep.
what if you're sort of isolated? Are there any things that, have you ever come across athletes that need more like how to push as an individual athlete just because they're on another level? Um, it's got to be
That's
tough.
where I would
Yeah.
just encourage them to race more. There's plenty of
Mhm.
races outside NICA. There's a short track series down near Charlotte early in the year. There's series of mountain bike races across North Carolina, Virginia. I'm sure anyone else, any other part of the country or part of the world has some sort of series like that outside of their main focus. And that's where, maybe you don't come into it quite as rested as you normally would for a peak event, but you come into it to knowing that you're just going to push all out, and it's going to be one of those days where maybe you're getting a great workout, but you're practicing mentally working out on a race where you're really going to try to push the limit. And because in training you don't have anyone to push with, so you're going to go to that race with the goal of trying to push all out and work on that, being in that all out headspace.
Love that. Nothing like racing, that is for sure.
No.
Uh, Skills and power. As a roadie, I always like hearing about this and how you approach it and what do you think of, both are important. How do you balance this? Just, yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, it's generally what I've had to do is find some sort of mix that works best with an athlete. It's pretty individualized because some athletes are going to be more biased one way or the other. You're just coming in. Some are going to be more physically developed and not really need too much stimulus in terms of the pure power world, but maybe they don't quite ride trails enough. So we've got to do more of their hard rides on the trails and focus on their skills So a lot of it can be just learning an athlete and where their strengths are, but a lot of it also is just knowing that both are really important. And the closer you get to a race, that intensity goes up, but also the need for really high speed trail work goes up.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a challenge as a coach to make sure you're balancing that correctly. But in the end, a lot of these NICA racers are on a time constraint, like we talked about earlier. So, and with their races being an hour or less, they're doing a pretty intense training plan because they're not doing that much volume. So it can be pretty easy to work in, 2, maybe 3 intensity sessions in a week and splitting those up in some way based on intensity or power.
So when I hear skills and I'm thinking, okay, what are the demands of the race? I'm thinking, your bike handling skills and being able to ride the trail at race speed. But breaking
Yeah.
that down, and especially maybe for a coach who's like myself, not a mountain biker, what is really skills training besides being able to ride a trail fast, like picking lines, and can you go in on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's just being comfortable on your bike handling that fast, knowing it's a lot of it is just knowing and experience because you don't want to be sprinting into corners, slamming your brakes and sprinting back out. You'd rather cruise into the corner, not brake as much and have a ton of speed and then be able to hit it hard coming back out. It's a lot about being smooth and flowing. And so actually one workout I'm a really big fan of that isn't complicated workout by any means, but it's just going out and doing a 30 or 40-minute trail tempo that is just focusing on flowing. And the big mental thing there is not focusing on pushing hard because that's not the goal of the day. The goal of the day is to go as fast as possible while not pushing too hard.
Mm.
And oddly enough, when I used to do this workout, a lot of my fastest times on Strava segments on trails are from this workout because you don't get caught up in trying to sprint in and out of every corner. You focus on trying to ride smooth. And in the end, you learn that that actually makes you a whole lot faster because you carry so much more speed. You're not wasting your energy sprinting out of every corner, and you have so much more to use when you get to a hill or a big power section.
So get even more granular for the athlete that is hearing this and thinking, "Oh damn, that's totally me, screeching into the corner, sprinting out." How do you get into that flow state if you're just naturally not that flowy? You're more abrupt and you don't have the speed through the corner and it's like you're herky jerky.
Yeah.
What are some things they can, okay, how do I break this down? I don't have a mentor in my town that's good at this. What am I going to do?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think it probably is one of those things again that works different for everybody, but I kind of like I was saying earlier, there's not much more you can think about other than just not focusing on your power, but trying to focus on going fast, and that will kind of naturally lend you to just riding smooth because at your core that that is the fastest way to ride your bike. Um, but if you just don't focus on the power aspect of it, like a lot of kids who have power meters are going to try to, it's a trail workout, but they're still going to try to get their average power as high as you can. And you almost want to focus on getting as low as you can while
Mhm.
still going as fast because that's how you're going to be the smoothest and waste the least amount of energy. Because if we're doing a 3 by 20 minute trail effort, well, your race isn't 20 minutes. If you're full gas at the end of that, that's great. That's a great workout. But if you could go the same speed and have it feel more like a tempo effort, that's great because you've got to do that 3 more times or 2 or 3 more times without rest, and that's your race
I love that. And I think that concept is even important for road racers, any racer to think about how can I pedal the least, go the fastest, save the
for
most
sure.
energy. I mean, that's the name of the game. It's don't just go really hard all the time.
I mean, in a crit, we used to do the average power competition. Who could get through the crit with the lowest average power? Because that's how you practice your pack skills.
Hmm. I lost that competition. I used to do that with a teammate, and shout out to John Hunter. This guy, oh man, John, for people that know him, he would be able to just cruise in the pack and he would last in any pro crit, the ones where I get spit out the back. He'd be like, what were your watts? I'm like, oh, 370 something. He's like, dude, I did 307 and I lasted
Yeah.
longer than like you need to work on your pack skills. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it makes such a difference. Yeah, if you're out there doing crits, start doing this with a teammate. It will help you get faster by
Yeah.
being able to go
And if you
slower.
just think about it during the race, just man, how could I get to the front now without doing this massive sprint in the wind up the side of the pack? Like, can I just slowly filter through and take a lap or two to get to the front? But I did it through the middle, just holding my momentum through corners and oh wow, I got there and my average power went down. My heart rate's still low. Now I'm at the front and I'm ready to attack. I'm not at the front and I need to recover.
Get to the front and then go back again.
Yeah, exactly.
What else are some tips for the NICA collegiate mountain bike racers out there that we might not have hit on?
I would say definitely. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with practice, but if you can, I know not everybody's got a group like this, but getting out there with a group on the trails or, wherever you like to train, it's first of all, it's fun. And a lot of these kids, I really want to make sure I'm not pushing them too hard because you'd rather last long in the sport than, be really fast for a year or two.
Mhm.
So getting out with a good group of friends and fellow people that are at about your skill and speed level, or just above it, that's also a great one. Going and riding with people who are just a little bit better than you. This is going to be a really good way to get a lot better really fast. Because if you're going out and riding a moderate pace on some trails and they're not working too hard because they've got great skills, but you're full gas because you've got to sprint out of every corner because you're not cornering as fast, you're gonna start cornering faster really quickly. So that would definitely be a recommendation of mine, is to obviously always try to ride with other people, especially when you're doing kind of race pace style workouts. But riding with people who are better than you is definitely a great idea.
I love that. And one thing that Owen put together that we'll put a link for everybody in the show notes. We're going to put a plan up for specifically NICA racers with the races set out. Um, and, you know, I think, yeah, talk about that real quickly because I love
Yeah.
having that availability to athletes who can't afford to have a coach. Obviously, you're coaching as well if somebody wants one-on-one coaching. But yeah, hit on some high points of the plan just so someone would know what to expect if they're checking that out.
Yeah, so it's a plan that starts in early December. Obviously, if you've got other sports and stuff going on, it's pretty easy to be adapted to starting a little bit later. A lot of those early weeks are just base training and getting you used to riding your bike a lot, so that when you get closer to the season, your body's ready to hit it really hard, and it can make a lot more adaptations from the high intensity work. But then you get into the season. I built this plan around the North Carolina NICA schedule. I know some states are going to be a little bit different. We are a spring league too. A lot of states are fall leagues. So I guess this isn't quite as relevant to you. Maybe it is if you've got another series you're racing. But it's 6 races, the 5 regular season races and the state championship at the end of the season that are about every other week in the spring. Um, it's built around those races, getting you prepped each week for those races, hitting some workouts and some training in between race weeks, and then also making sure you have enough rest. This plan is built kind of around the average rider and racer. So there will definitely be some who need a little bit more, both intensity and volume, and some who need little bit less. So I would definitely advise anyone who's using this plan to listen to your body over the plan. If you're just way overcooked, you need to listen to your body because this plan's not adapting every day to how you feel. And if you feel like it's right for you to ride more, I would advise you to take it slowly and cautiously so you don't overdo it. But there are definitely some people who need that.
What do you think when an athlete hears listen to my body and ride more if my body needs it? What were some indicators to you when you said I think I can ride a little bit more that worked out? Because I don't think every athlete knows what that really means or
Yeah,
what to
that's
look for. I guess they know what it means,
a
but
great
they're like,
one.
how do I
Yeah.
feel this?
Yeah, I actually, this is a great question because I have a pretty straight up answer to this. If your legs hurt, that's fine. Your legs are going to hurt. We're training. But if you feel like you're falling asleep on the bike or you can't stay awake the whole day, that's when you're fatigued and need to rest.
Mm.
Everyone's legs are going to hurt. We're training. You went out and did intervals, and now tomorrow you've got to go out and do an endurance ride. Yeah, you did an all out workout yesterday. There's going to be destroyed muscles in your legs and lactic acid buildup. Your legs are going to hurt. But if you feel like you're riding your bike and you're going to fall asleep, that's when you got to call it and take some rest.
I love that. That's a simple way to check in with yourself. And if
Yeah,
anybody has, if you're out there listening, you do have a fall league for next year and you need help, we can definitely make something
I'll
up
for sure
for
make a
you that
plan for the
follows
fall.
along. And I think this was a dynamic plan that follows exact dates. We could always make one that's more, that somebody could apply to their calendar at any point in time. So yeah, if you need something, hit up Owen at
Yeah.
evoke.bike, hit up me, Brendan at evoke.bike. Any final thoughts for the people out there?
Yeah, I just what you were saying there in terms of the training plans, if you've got a different league or a different series you're training for, it's pretty easy for me to take that plan and just go in and adapt it quickly. Just to, if you still just want to buy the basic training plan, it's not too hard for me to just adapt it to a slightly different race schedule. So,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely, there's no cost to send in an email to me. So definitely reach out and I'll be happy to, offer what I can to you.
Awesome. And we'll put a link also. We do these Ignite plans that people know about. It's like semi-custom. You would be able to have Owen really customize it to all of your races, have him know more about you, especially if you have heart rate or power data that he can look at. It's obviously a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't totally crush the bank account. So I'll put a link to that as well. Owen, thanks, man, for doing this. Everybody, good luck with your training and racing, especially all you NICA racers out there. Let's get it, and we will talk to you soon.